religion has understood God, but forgets how God interacts with the world, which is through consciousness. Then you have science, which understands consciousness, but doesn't understand God. So they're both missing those vital parts. And that's what we've established scientifically, is the link between God, consciousness, and matter. We have over 6,000 experiments. We have not had a single failed experiment.
Meet Dahryn Trivedi, an enlightened spiritual master and globally recognized speaker known for her divine blessings that bridge science and higher consciousness. Her work has been studied through thousands of scientific experiments and published in peer-reviewed journals worldwide. Today, Dahryn will help us unlock our deeper well-being, clarity, and transformation. Religion is something that a lot of people believe in across the globe, but spirituality is not the same as religion, and science is something which is totally different. Is there a correlation between the three?
Religion has lost its integrity. Right?
And why is that?
When you remove science, you remove integrity. Science is not just an institution. Science is the objective mind.
So when you give this divine blessing to an individual, is it supposed to be targeted at a certain challenge that the person is going through in his or her life, or is it something that is going to tackle every area of their lives?
It's inherently intelligent. It's the divine. God knows everything. Consciousness is fundamental force of all of life. It knows your life. It's the one that programmed your life.
Does it also depend on the level of faith the recipient has?
Do non-living materials have a faith or a belief? Do microorganisms have a faith or a belief? What about plants and trees, bacteria, viruses, fungi? None of these things have belief systems. They all get transformed with the effect of this blessing. While science is incapable of directly measuring consciousness, there's no technology available that can directly measure consciousness.
Would you give me an example of how these experiments work?
One testimony I love to share is from my personal assistant. She lived her whole life with a very severe autoimmune condition called Crohn's disease. In order to save her life, they had to remove her colon. She's using the bathroom 30 times a day, right? No ability to control it. So she's highly depressed, full of anxiety. Her mental health got so bad, she was suicidal so many times. She started questioning the nature of God and God's existence at that point. After the blessing, she uses the bathroom 3 to 4 times a day now. Zero pain, zero inflammation. She hasn't been to the hospital in years. We're affecting changes that are so revolutionary. We've had issues publishing these studies. What happened with this recent publication that we try to get published in a very high-profile journal?
Do you think somewhere we are headed towards like a global annihilation?
Yeah.
Good to meet you. So good to meet you too. Really tall.
I know.
How tall are you?
About 5'11".
That's wonderful.
I can.
And I don't remember the question, so I don't know where I was going. That's okay.
Hi, Dahryn.
Hello.
So happy to have you on Candid Confessions.
I'm very happy to be here.
And I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you today.
Thank you.
Why don't we start by telling my viewers a little bit about yourself?
What I do is basically I co-lead an organization, a nonprofit called Divine Connection International. It is founded by my husband, who is also my guru, Guruji Trivedi. And basically what this organization does, is we are establishing a scientific database for the existence of God and consciousness.
Oh.
Right. We're integrating the link between how God, consciousness, and matter are all interlinked, how they work together. And on top of that, and as well as providing this scientific database by conducting our own experiments through divine blessings, right? We're also providing real tangible solutions for people struggling with their health, their quality of life, their relationships, their finances, just any area of life, mental, emotional health problems. We actually have memberships and things that we provide for these people, solutions for them that, they have not found anywhere else by other conventional methodologies, by even other alternative and complementary therapies. So that's what our organization is. It has a very big mission. It's not limited to just human health, but we're also working to establish a new scientific paradigm, an evolutionary science, a preventative model of healthcare, right? We obviously have the establishing science with consciousness and the divine. But on top of that, we're also working to create new materials to advance our technology, which we found that these blessings are also capable of transforming non-living materials.
Oh.
We're actually creating, new agriculture. We're creating bioavailable and highly nutritious food products without the use of toxic chemicals or fertilizers, right? Something that science has not been able to provide or find an answer for. And so we're actually a multifaceted organization that touches upon various different projects here and there. But one, obviously very dear to our hearts is helping people and their suffering and improve their quality of life, which is a very big part of our organization. And what led me to that, I mean, like I said, my husband is the founder, so it was basically my journey meeting this incredible enlightened being on this planet. That began from a very young age, I'd like to say. I grew up with a very religious and spiritual household. My whole family, very Christian upbringing. I went to church all the time. My father was a choir director at church. And on top of that, my mother was also very spiritual and open-minded. She had a miraculous experience in the past, which led her to try out a variety of different things, different alternative therapies and modalities. So I had a very open-ended, relationship with God and religion and spirituality from a very early age. But one thing that I didn't have context for was these experiences that I had from, as early as I can remember.
What kind of experiences?
These experiences I like to call were more like direct experiences with God, where it existed outside of the context of conventional religion or anything I'd really read about in a book or heard, pastors or ministers or anybody talk about. And it was these incredible moments as a child. I was in this state of just deep stillness and peace. And in those moments, it was like my being, my entirety of my being, my awareness, my consciousness, everything felt like it was overwhelmed and absorbed into something bigger than myself. I felt like I had dissolved into something. I felt like my whole being, everything dissolved. And in that state, it's like this incredible ecstasy starts to fill your being. It's like this bliss that permeated every cell within me, every part of me, until eventually it just felt like I dissolved completely into that.
Wow.
And so those experiences, when I came out of them or even going into them, I understood in those moments, this is God. That's what I understood God to be from a very young age before I was even told what God was. And so that for me was my whole relationship as well as my purpose, because it was the most complete, the most extraordinarily happy, the most peaceful, the greatest sense of well-being, happiness and contentment, just absolute perfection and completion. That state that I've never felt at any other time throughout my childhood or any other time in my life was in that state. And so for me, I felt like there's no purpose beyond this. This is the peak of life. Whatever this experience is, this must be what life is about, is to have these experiences to interact with whatever I'm interacting with in this moment. And so my whole life was basically, waiting for that next experience.
And how often did you have these experiences?
From very early on, they happened relatively frequently, like maybe, once every few months, which is
Wow.
pretty frequently for that kind of experience. But the thing is, and maybe they would happen like just for a couple hours at a time.
Okay.
They'd kind of come and go, they'd fade away after a while, maybe after a day or two. But what always left me, when those experiences faded, is this incredible feeling of longing and loneliness. It was like a soul sickness, because it was like I had touched upon something that was so essentially, life, that I felt like I finally connected with something that was the true meaning of life. And then it just kind of disappeared from my grasp. And so in those moments where it kind of disappeared, this incredible longing and soul sickness filled me. And so, as well as this incredible love, I had an incredible sense of love and joy with life, but this longing to have more of those experiences,
I
to
can
find
only
God.
imagine actually what when you're talking about it,
Yeah.
it's giving me goosebumps and I'm kind of getting mesmerized with just listening about this experience.
Right.
I cannot even imagine what you must have felt and what you feel when you go through these experiences. But a
Yeah.
lot of things that you're talking about are things that I've never heard about before.
Right.
Like scientific experiments and correlating them with consciousness
Right.
and blessings and divine blessings, which can actually help agriculture,
Mhm.
also human beings and their suffering. So, would you like to tell me a little bit more about what exactly a divine blessing is?
So, a divine blessing is when an enlightened being, right? What consciousness does is it organizes and evolves you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, people are a very unique entity on this planet with their capability of evolution is essentially unlimited. So, they are one of those unique entities that can evolve themselves beyond the consciousness of nature. And we call that state enlightenment.
Okay.
Right. So in that state of enlightenment, they have, you could say, a unique type of access to the divine, right? Because they're not within the bounds of nature. Now they're outside of those bounds. They're within the bounds of a creator force and authority, right? The essence of creation, right? Something divine. And so in that place, their consciousness being merged in that place, right? They have this ability to pray to that authority, right? It's like their prayers are heard, their prayers are answered. And in that state, right, they request to that authority, to the divine, that, please evolve the consciousness of whatever the recipient may be, whether it's a non-living material, a living organism, a human, right? Basically just, let your grace, work here, let it evolve whatever the recipient is. And that consciousness always evolves that recipient for its higher functioning, its better usefulness, its greater efficiency on this planet, no matter what the recipient is. So that's how the blessing works. It's basically just an evolution of consciousness happening from, divine grace.
So, when you give this divine blessing to an individual,
Mhm.
uh, is it supposed to be targeted at a certain challenge that the person is going through in his or her life, or is it something that is going to tackle every area of their lives?
It's inherently intelligent. It's the divine. God knows everything. Consciousness is fundamental force of all of life. It knows your life. It's the one that programmed your life. It's the one that governs and regulates it. It knows all of your problems already, right? So this consciousness we found throughout all of our experiments. We have over 6,000 experiments, and we found in each and every single one of them, we have not had a single failed experiment. I'm not saying 6,010 of them have been successful. 6,000 and every single one of them have been successful. And all of these experiments, they demonstrate something unique about consciousness because we're applying the same concept to every experiment. We're not targeting a different pathway. We're not applying a new mechanism or a new technique or a new practice. It's the same blessing for everything. But that intelligent energy knows how to treat a crop versus a non-living material versus a microbe versus a person. We see, I have no need. We have clinical trials, double blinded. Like, we have no idea who the recipients are, what their problems are, anything about them. And this energy has an intelligence to know all of your problems as well as the solution.
And sometimes you would say that the person himself doesn't know what exactly the problem is,
Exactly.
but it just gets hit at the right chord. But tell me,
That happening, yeah.
you're giving this blessing, is it like a procedure, a ritual? What exactly is
No,
to be done?
it's an inherent connection.
Is it like you go in a meditative state? Is it done remotely, or do you need the person present?
No, it can be done remotely or in the presence, but essentially there's no trick or technique or practice behind it. None of that is absolutely required. It's simply, grace. It's that connection to the divine that all of us inherently have, but all we're really doing is building that connection, strengthening it. And then through that divine grace, there's this evolution that happens within each and every one of us. And all these problems that exist in our day-to-day lives, everything that we face is simply an indication of lower levels of consciousness.
Okay.
All problems problems exist from low levels of consciousness, a low state of evolution within us. So to get rid of these problems, all we have to do is evolve that consciousness, and that consciousness knows how to treat everything. So it's kind of like I give darkness and light as an example. Darkness doesn't exist. It's just the absence of something. So darkness is the absence of light. Higher consciousness is that light in our lives that kicks out all the problems that we have. So all we must do is evolve our consciousness. There is no trick or technique that can evolve it. Consciousness came from the Creator, right? It is the substrate of our existence. It's the fundamental force of our lives. Matter is derived from that. Our thoughts are derived from matter, right? All of these things that happen in our lives, they're all derivatives. They all flow downstream from consciousness. So anything that you do downstream is not going to affect anything upstream. Right? God created life through consciousness. Only God is the authority that can affect consciousness. So you have to appease that authority. It's only through that divine authority that we can make changes at the level of consciousness, which is why you need a guru or an enlightened being who has that connection inherently.
And if I'm working with you as a guru
Right.
to get the blessing, to change my life,
Right.
is it also something that I can learn in the process?
I wouldn't say it's a learning, more as it is, like I said, it's a development, it's a spiritual evolution. There is some aspect of nurturing because there's so much that we've learned and adopted in these lives, especially this concept of practice and effort, provides this kind of outcome for us, right? So there's a lot of unlearning, I would say, a lot of nurturing about the nature of the divine. I call them the divine principles and fundamentals. It's like a restoration of our natural blueprint. And that natural blueprint is purity and innocence. That's who we are inherently. And life has a way of twisting that, or I like to say it's kind of like creating a coating around this essence within us that makes it hard for us to connect to it or feel it or be able to tap into it. And so basically this nurturing as well as these divine blessings help restore that vitality. They help restore that divine presence. They help restore our true nature of innocence and purity, and they help evolve us into higher levels of consciousness.
And how would you, just to ask a little more technically,
Sure.
if I ask you to bless me, how long does it take? Are there like
Moments.
number of sessions?
Moments.
Okay.
And for every person, the number of sessions, you could say it depends on the individual. So we have many testimonials and experiences for people who they have problems that resolved after one blessing. We have people who maybe their deterioration is a little more severe, right? So in these cases, maybe it takes a little more time for them. Ultimately, we've never had a case where a blessing doesn't have an outcome. It's usually always has an outcome, but it's dependent upon that person's circumstances, their life, what they're going through. I like to give an example of like a scale from like -100 to 0 to 100, right? So depending on where you are on that spectrum, you could be a -100 or -5. If you're only at -5, one blessing might be enough to boost you, to evolve you to the point where you're at maybe +5, and you experience, some of the benefits of consciousness instead of just the reprieve of suffering. Whereas from -100, maybe it's reprieve, right? You're evolving, you're slowing down the deterioration, and eventually you're rebuilding your system, you're rebuilding, your biology, your physiology. All of these things need to be rebuilt, right? Everything needs to be detoxified and purged. And eventually after that, you start to really experience the true benefits. And it's not that the benefits aren't happening. It's just like what we experience as benefits right away compared to other people. It might be noticeable in different ways with other people sooner.
And does it also depend on the level of faith the recipient has?
No, absolutely not.
Even if you're, blessing somebody who doesn't believe what is happening, it'll affect them as well. It'll benefit them as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Here's the thing. So this is why we're establishing this scientifically, because for so long, God has been limited to faith alone. Right? And we're saying that if God is real, if God created all of life, if God created you and me, God also created the room we're sitting in, the microphones, all these materials we're using, right? Our oxygen, plant life, everything. all things, right? Because that's the origin story of all religion, is God created everything out of nothing. Nothing existed before except God, and from God's own existence, everything was created. God created the universe and all its creation through God's grace, right? To experience the glory of God, right? That's the story that all religion refers to as. So God is the essence of all of us, right? If that's true, then God should be an empirical reality. God should be a fact-based reality. But nobody has been able to take it. Nobody from the realm of faith-based, understanding of life has been able to take God and measure God in a laboratory, take God and measure consciousness, validate its effects. And we're saying that's not correct. You should be able to do that. We agree with the reason why scientists have been disregarding placebo and psychology and human experience in all these testimonials. I feel like science is very legitimate in
So would you give me an
seeing this.
example of how these experiments work?
Absolutely. And I also want to say that, do non-living materials have a faith or a belief? Do microorganisms have a faith or a belief? Right? What about plants and trees, bacteria, viruses, fungi? None of these things have belief systems. They all get transformed with the effect of this blessing.
Okay.
So that's evidence to the contrary, that you don't need a pre-established belief or faith in God. Because what does a metal or ceramic or a polymer have faith in? We don't know. Right. And we have many experiences. My personal assistant is one of them, who used to be an atheist before she came, met us, received a blessing, transformed her life, and now that affirmed her faith and belief in the divine and a God. And so how these experiments work is, we've conducted 6,000 experiments, like I said, in multiple different disciplines of science, life sciences and, non-living materials, material science. We've conducted it with agriculture, microbes, bacteria, viruses, fungi. We've dealt with, animals as well. We've done it on plants, seeds, trees, soil. And then we've also conducted experiments on non-living materials, metals, ceramics, polymers, chemicals, organic and inorganic compounds. And what we do is, and we've also conducted 4 clinical trials on human health and well-being. And what we do essentially is, while science is incapable of directly measuring consciousness, there's no technology available that can directly measure consciousness. It's like, it's like the wind. It's invisible by nature, but you can measure its effects, right? You see the wind blowing in a tree, you can recognize the wind's there. Right? So in the same way, that's how we conduct these experiments, is that we cannot measure consciousness directly, but we can measure its impact.
Okay.
We can measure its effects. And so that's what we do, is we apply these blessings to all these different areas and disciplines of science. And through the application of these blessings, we always have a control group as well to measure, the comparative difference between a control group that's not receiving the blessing. And in the cases of psychological influence, we also have a placebo, psychological control group, to measure, because placebo, there are differences between control as well as placebo and psychological groups. So we take both of those groups and then we compare it with the treated group. And I'm not talking about like a simple, plant in our backyard. I'm not talking about like a little tree or anything like that, or small groups measuring only trivial and subjective parameters, like most of these, a lot of, unfortunately, religious figureheads and transformational leaders have been able to skew some of the data for their followers and develop these very limited scientific protocols that don't actually say much over time. If you do those kind of trivial experiments for very small groups of people over very short periods of time, you can associate, lower blood pressure with smoking with that kind of protocol, right? But if you actually conduct it over a long enough period of time with enough people, you can actually see a correlation between smoking and increased blood pressure, right? So those are the problems with those kinds of experiments. What we do, we have all the gold standards using all the most sophisticated technologies used by NASA to measure the outcomes of these experiments. And then we have the proper protocols, materials, and methods that are used by science, all scientific methods today. And then like agriculture, for example, we're doing acreage. We're doing acreage of blessed treated groups mixed in with, the control groups as well. So you can't even say it's the plot of land. There's
Right.
something unique about where it's planted in or any of that. The environment's different.
Yeah.
No, we're getting rid of all the subjective data, all the possible biases or influences that could possibly account for any of the outcomes we see. And on top of that, the results are so unprecedented by that even conventional methods, whatever methodologies, alternative, complementary, conventional, whatever we have available today, has not been able to produce the kind of results that we have seen with our studies. Our science is so legitimate. We have over 6,000 science experiments, but this has led to over 670 peer-reviewed science publications. That's the gold standard, right? And they have been indexed, right, all over the world in over 3,000 universities in over 100 countries. Sorry, I'll say that one more time. Indexed in over 3,000 universities in over 100 countries. And I'm talking about universities like Harvard, Cambridge, MIT, right, Oxford, as well as the National Institutes of Health in America. So, right, we are widely recognized as authorities in this area of consciousness science.
Religion is
Yes.
something that a lot of people believe in across the globe,
Right.
but spirituality is not the same as religion.
No.
Right?
No.
And science is something which is totally different.
Mhm.
Is there a correlation between the three?
Yes, and I feel like a lot of times they think they're all operating separately from each other, but it's kind of like if you take a droplet of water from the ocean, right, and you separate its different components and you make them think that they're all separate from each other, right? They're all in reality describing the same thing, right? They're all just coming from different approaches, different perspectives, but all of them compose one reality. They're all defining consciousness in a different way.
Okay.
Right? So science is the discovery of consciousness, religion is the adoption of it, and spirituality is the expression of it.
Oh.
Right? So all of them actually work, right, in perfect harmony with each other when they understand the context that they're in. When they lose that important context, like science, for example, has lost that context, right? That important factor, that missing link, right, between like how consciousness operates with the material world and where it comes from. Because of that, we assume that consciousness is derivative, right, of matter. It's a byproduct of the brain. And that's the very root cause of science's inability to address our most pressing problems that we see worldwide, right, at pandemic level proportions, like our
Yes.
mental health crisis, our agricultural pandemic with all these, toxic food systems and inability to provide nutritious, high quality food, as well as inability to advance our current technology. We're in an age of AI. Like, technology is at the need of huge advancements, but we don't have the proper materials to be able to execute the proper and quick utilization of that kind of advancements. So without applying consciousness and being able to somehow put that in the context of God, right, we're actually find ourselves at limitations, and more than limitations, we find ourselves at breakdown level. We find that all of our systems of our modern world are starting to collapse in on themselves, and that's for the very sole reason that we have ignored the true nature of what it means to be a human, what life is, its origin being consciousness, and consciousness coming from God, from an authority, a divine creator on this planet.
I think also to a certain extent at loggerheads, because science is always believed to be the opposite of God.
Right.
It's just believed to be the opposite of, it's just logic. And God
Yeah.
is something which is not logical. So
Yeah.
would you also say that religion also has somewhere lost that context that you're talking about?
Absolutely. Religion has lost its integrity.
And
Right.
why is that?
Well, so for so long, science and religion were actually not separate. Right? Eons ago, they were actually united. They were
How's
worked
that?
together. Right? This is before the time of Galileo. A lot of ancient civilizations, science and religion worked together to advance our societies and our technology. Right? God was infused in the very nature of life and phenomena and discovery. Right? And so when that really when science and religion reached a divide, which was after the time of Galileo properly, right? Science began, constructing the world and its viewpoint, its paradigm of the world based upon a materialistic perspective, right? Mechanical and chemical. And then we have religion, which because of its inability to prove, right? It's been very futile in its ability to take God, take something that is supposedly omnipresent, omniscient, and prove that scientifically. And so as a result, religion claims to have a bunch of things that can optimize human potential, transform your fate and fortune, but is unable to take those methodologies, prove them scientifically, right? As a result, it's been limiting itself to a faith-based status. When you remove science, you remove integrity. Science is not just an institution. Science is the objective mind. Science is scrutiny. Science is skepticism. Science is a healthy mind when it's conducted properly. And so science and religion should be held together. Science provides integrity that religion has lost. So that's where you see all the charlatans, all the con artists. You see all these people who rush in, especially in spirituality with the wellness industry, all these, people who are promoting, in fact, very dangerous tactics and practices that can actually harm human health.
Like, for example?
Oh, there are so many things, and useless protocols as well. It's like we were taught that lemon water for a long time could cure cancer, right? Celery juice. You have people who stopped taking cancer treatments and everything because they thought just drinking lemon juice every day could cure their cancer, right? There are a lot of things that science can't properly fix and address, right? So everybody runs to the wellness industry to find a solution because it acknowledges something that exists with human nature that science hasn't properly touched upon or addressed. So we run to wellness because it's touched upon, it's talked about there at the very least. We feel seen and heard, especially women. Women are actually one of the major consumers of the wellness industry, even more so than men. And unfortunately, that's because women have been disregarded scientifically for decades because all of the major science that we have today has been conducted on male physiology, male bodies. We've been treated, our physiologies have been assumed and inferred based upon males' physiologies. So we're assumed to just be men with breasts, as if there's nothing unique or different about a female's body or physiology. So we see a lot of things that are unaddressed, misdiagnosis, a lot of long-term management without any solutions within science. And so you see a lot of distrust in that institution that's developing now. A lot of people are finding distrust, or they're finding a lot of invalidation in what scientists are saying now because they see these loopholes, or they see these limits or these boundaries that science can't address. And mental health, emotional health is a huge one, right? We've seen more people are talking about mental health, right, than ever before. More people are seeking therapy. More people are taking drugs. More people are trying alternative and complementary therapies. The stigma is being decreased. And at the same time, mental health problems are increasing. They're not going away. They're not lowering. They're increasing in number more than ever before, right? Science has spent trillions of dollars, literally trillions, to try and find solutions for our modern health epidemic related to mental health. And no solutions, nothing, no answers, nothing properly. If there was an answer, we could apply it to everybody universally. It would be a conventional treatment that everybody could participate in. Instead, we have you try this, you try that, maybe this will work, maybe that. We don't have an answer. We have managing symptoms. That's what we have, a Band-Aid. Right? Something that makes us feel better.
What should be done scientifically to treat mental health? Like, does it need to come in sync with religion or spirituality and then co-create something?
They need to work together. They honestly need to work together. But that's what we've seen is consciousness is a missing link behind all of them. Right? So consciousness, there's already this theory, right, that consciousness is fundamental. Max Planck developed that theory over decades of rigorous research, right? He's a Nobel laureate, right? The father of quantum physics, right? He declared that throughout all his years of research, he came to the hypothesis, he said, I believe that consciousness is fundamental and matter is derived from consciousness. And then you have religion, right, which talks about God, right? But at the same time, doesn't properly explain how God interacts with our material world. How does God operate within our world? How does it work? We've resorted to materials and methods that seems to lack that proper context, which is why they don't work, which is why they take huge effort and time. And the younger generation sees the older generation using all these old, tricks and dogmas and practices and all these different pujas that all this older generation is following, dogmatically worshiping, and they see very little outcome. They see all the outcome in science. They're leaving religion and spirituality by the droves.
The people who are following these practices for
Right.
years and years,
Yes.
who've lost kind of, the reason behind why these are supposed to be done. I'm sure back in the days, there must be some logic to it.
Right.
Do you think people who are doing these practices without understanding the logic are still benefiting from it?
No, I feel like a lot of it is either purely psychological, or if they are benefiting, it's probably very trivial, but it's coming from something else. It's not coming from the trick or the practice inherently.
What could it be coming from then?
I mean, I feel like some people have this inherent connection, right? This initial purity, or that they're at a certain level of evolution in their consciousness where there's a moment in life where that kind of like that pendulum swings from one side to the other. And so that shift in consciousness is what creates the outcome. And they misattribute it to the practices and the techniques.
Is that what you call the, the different phases that the brain goes through? The gamma phase, the gamma realm, or some theta realm, or something. What are those?
No. So, right, those are different waves, or
Okay.
brain waves.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is before,
Okay.
right? So brain waves, right? We could say those are produced by the brain, right? And I'm saying consciousness produces the brain. Right. So we're talking about the brain waves as if, that is something that creates, that's a misunderstanding that science has, that these brain waves, right, is ultimately what gives us this conscious experience, this awareness, and that is consciousness.
Oh.
And what we're saying is consciousness is something bigger than that. It's a divinely intelligent energy, right, that is coming before that. I like to say it's the DNA of our DNA. Right? It is the program of our existence. It's the substrate and the program that gives our life whatever it is today. It tells a cell what it will become. It gives the destiny of a cell, the destiny of an atom. You change the consciousness in the atom, you change the atom. You don't change the atom to change the consciousness in the atom, right? We've done that with our scientific experiments. By simply changing the consciousness in the atom, the entire structure of the atom changes as a result, right? And so what is missing, right, is this link of consciousness. So religion, right, has understood God, but forgets how God interacts with the world, which is through consciousness. Then you have science, which understands consciousness, but doesn't understand God, right? So they're both missing those vital parts. And that's what we've established scientifically is the link between God, consciousness, and matter, right? And so what we're doing is we're creating a new scientific paradigm. We're ushering in a new type of science on this planet, something revolutionary that can answer and provide real solutions to all of our problems that we see today, literally all of them. And then we're also giving religion its integrity back. The people that abuse, the people that manipulate, maybe even with good intention, right? Ultimately, if the substance isn't there, it's giving false hope. So we're actually providing the integrity back to something that has lost its integrity, which is why so many people have left it, right? So we're doing something that will revolutionize all of them and bring it all together and make them integrate and work together to evolve, right? To grow, to optimize the potential of humanity, the conditions of our world as we see it.
And what about destiny? Like a lot of people say that I can change my destiny. My destiny is in my own hands. If I really believe, if I have a lot of faith when I'm doing something, I can actually create my own path. Is that really true?
I would say destiny exists in the program of consciousness itself, right? Not in our belief.
A lot of people say that by changing an alphabet in the name and changing the numerology of how they can actually change the destiny. And can we change our own destiny by just believing and having faith?
No. So what we have is a program that we're operating within. And within that program, we have certain choices that we can make that maybe can improve the program that we're operating within. right? So, for example, take a computer. It has a program, right? You can do things within that program to maybe make that program run better, right? But you're still operating the same program.
Right.
So, from different levels of consciousness, you have like a lower level of consciousness, which is basically all levels exist from lower levels of all problems exist from just lower levels of consciousness, right? Lower levels of evolution. So, in there, we have maybe a set of parameters, right? We have, 0 to 5, right? So within those levels of parameters that we have, we can either operate at 0 or operate at 5. So we do everything right in our life where we're conducting our lives the best we can, all our efforts and everything, we can go up to 5. So it feels, maybe within those parameters, it feels like a huge shift. It feels like something big is happening because anytime you go from 0 to 5, right, it feels good. It feels
Right.
like you're doing something incredible.
Some progress is happening.
Right? Progress is happening, right? But what we have found is like there are so many science experiments. Take, for example, we're testing blueberries and we're trying to figure out the efficacy and bioavailability of blueberries, how blueberries affects our physiology. Well, science is a certain phenomenon where you take multiple clinical trials in different groups of people, and they're all trying to alter their diet and lifestyle and incorporate more blueberries into their diet, which science has shown outside of clinical trials, right, has huge antioxidant properties. The moment it enters into a human's body, everybody treats those blueberries differently. We have some clinical trials where those blueberries have huge, outcomes, huge results on paper for clinical trials. And then we have the same studies that have been replicated and the results aren't as good. Or we show even results that show the contrary.
Okay.
Right? So what science has not been able to figure out is we're just saying everybody's different.
Right.
Well, what's different about everybody? It's their consciousness, right? Your consciousness is what determines the efficacy of whatever you do, the bioavailability of whatever you do, not just the food you eat. You can change your food, your lifestyle, eat healthier, right? Perform better, do everything, but you're still ultimately, your bioavailability is determined by consciousness, what you absorb, right? The information, the opportunities that come to you, right? What you have no ability to control what your body absorbs from your food. You can change your diet, but only your body has that inherent intelligence to decide if it's going to absorb the nutrition or not.
Absolutely.
Right? So there are a lot of things that are outside of our control. And we've seen like what destiny is, and we've shown that destiny lives with consciousness. Consciousness gives us our destiny. And that's what we've, conducted multiple times across all these experiments. Again, take an atom, for example, a material, right? You see the periodic table of elements, right? We have all these different materials that exist within nature, and they have something called physical constants. So those physical constants is like you have the character and behavior of the material. In the same way people have different characters and behaviors. Everybody has a different personality, different expression on this planet. Materials have the same thing. Depending on their atomic and molecular structures, right? Ultimately, they behave in a very specific way, right? Water will boil always at 100 degrees centigrade, right? So you have certain different physical constants, latent heat, melting point, firing point. You have viscosity, density. These are all physical constants, right? You change the program, the information within the atom. You're changing the destiny of that atom. When you change that destiny, you put in a new program, you alter that information, then the character as well as the behavior of the material alters completely. We've been able to change boiling points, melting points, physical constants that science says you can't change.
Wow.
Right? We've been able to actually change it only through the divine blessing, just by waving your hands, right? Altering things at the level of consciousness alters the material. So these are things that science has not able to do, right? Unless we're able to like apply an external energy, you like add salt to water or anything, but just by changing the structure of water itself, like the inherent nature of water is always to behave this way unless you change it molecularly, unless you alter it with another energy or chemical energy, right? You can't just make water be different.
Absolutely. And what about enlightenment? Like you're telling me that as a child, you started experiencing these moments which were very different, right? It's not something that a normal human being experiences.
Yes.
What exactly is enlightenment? Would you define those moments as something closer to enlightenment? Were you on your journey to achieve enlightenment?
I would say those are glimpses, right? Maybe glimpses. It's definitely, probably on the journey to enlightenment.
Right.
But what really helped facilitate that process, what made it happen quickly, right, was when I met my guru.
Right. So you got a perfect guidance in that
Right.
direction,
It
right?
was his blessings, his
Oh.
nurturing and his blessings that evolved my consciousness to the point in which now I am enlightened. I
So
reached my own awakening a year later.
would you say that a person, an enlightened person, is born? That this person, when the person is born, you already know that his destiny is to be enlightened at some point in life? Or would you say it is also something that can be acquired?
It's something that can be acquired.
And this acquisition happens through your own hard work or some meditation or some rituals that you do,
No.
or blessings.
Blessings. It's through our purity, our innocence, right? Disciplining our lives, following the divine principles and fundamentals, right? That's what I like to talk about. That's like the Sanatana Dharma. It's like following truth,
Okay.
right? And truth, it's like if you're following, consciousness has a nature to it, right? If we want to merge into the freedom, right? That's what enlightenment is. It's ultimate freedom, right? When you envision your life and freedom, right? When do you feel the most free? When you're happy, when you're healthy, right? When you're at its peak vitality, right? When your relationships are good, when your job is going well, all these things, when you feel control over your circumstances in your life, when you have command over your mind, your mental health, all of these things are indications of freedom. Right. This is, and that's why I say, like, the real outcome of spirituality is felt in real time. It's tangible. You don't wait till you die to experience the consequences of spiritual growth, right? You experience it here and now. There's tangible outcome that can be measured, right? So what we're talking about with enlightenment, right, is consciousness that has evolved, right, to that point where it's now beyond the consciousness of nature. And so I like to say everybody can do that, right? Everybody has consciousness. It just requires that evolution, right? We align ourselves with the divine principles. Those are the fundamental truths of life, right? It's like the things that promote, that give life to all of us, right? You harm another person, you are taking life away. You're not following the Dharma. You're not following the divine principles of life. What gives life? God is life. So God gives life. God breathes life into everything and into every moment. When we follow that path, right, we become better conductors of this divine energy, right? Of this consciousness that helps evolve our own consciousness. So it's not really an effort. Maybe the discipline is as much as the effort we do, but the actual grace, the actual transformation comes from God.
And how does this principle apply in the day and age that we are living in today? I mean, contemporary times. Is it the same, or is it? I mean, when I hear about it, it sounds like you have to denounce everything. What about material pleasures? I mean, could you be? I get it.
Absolutely
So,
not. So I love this question because, like, obviously here I am, fully dolled up, makeup, jewelry, hair done, outfit on, all of this. It's like, I don't look like your traditional, spiritual guru that you see, like,
Yeah.
a woman in a sari with no makeup on, an
Yeah.
aesthetic, renounce the world. I don't live in an ashram, none of these things. I live in the world. Most people live in the world, and God lives in the world too. God doesn't just live in an ashram or in the Himalayas. God lives everywhere. Right? So why do you have to run away from the world to experience God? That doesn't make sense to me, right? You're trying to run away from attachment. I love this story of, like, I'm sure a lot of people have heard the story. Maybe you have as well. It's the story of these two monks, right? That are, taking their boat and they're traveling across a river, right? And so there's this woman, right, who's at the bank of the river and trying to wave down the monks and ask for help for transportation across the river. And, one of the monks is, starts paddling over to, invite her onto the boat and take her across the river. And the other monk is saying, like, no, no, no. It's like, we're not supposed to interact with women or, have anything involved. No, you're totally following the wrong path. This is not spiritual. This is not correct. And the monk is just like, everything's fine. Just like, we'll take her. He took her on the boat, dropped her off at the river and continued on his journey. And the other monk was just ripping into him, just like, how could you do this? This is like against everything that we are as aesthetics, as renunciates. And he's like, I picked up the woman at that riverbank and dropped her off there, you're still carrying her.
Right.
It's like, you can go into renunciation, you can become an aesthetic, you can follow that path, but where are you? You're still with your mind. Attachment exists and lives everywhere. You can be attached to an idea. You can be attachment. Like, these are small things to get attached to, the physical, right? Those are baby steps into the spiritual. The biggest things, the hardest attachments that we have that are more difficult to let go of are our ideas, our concepts, even our concepts of God and what it means to be spiritual. It's like one of the very reasons I dress like this is to say that, it has nothing to do with that. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. You can be spiritual and enlightened and still be part of the world and still dress up and wear your makeup. It's like when you have what releases an attachment. People try and resolve attachments and detach themselves the wrong way. They try and force it. They try and remove desires. They try and discipline it out of them. And here's the thing, this world operates on desire. That desire breeds more desire, right? You're suppressing things. Nothing solves itself by being suppressed, right? And so what ends up happening is attachment is lost the moment you attach yourself to a higher goal, a higher entity, a higher attachment, right? When you are attached to here, for example, if you have a job that pays you, 100K a year versus 10K a year, you're not going to be attached to the 10K job, are you? You're going to be attached to the 100K job, right? So that resolves that attachment immediately to that lower level job. If that's all you have, then you're attached. Well, if you have God in your life, right, you can operate in the world, have no attachments, right? Because that is the greatest thing. Like I said, when I was entering into those states, it's like it was the most perfect and complete I've ever felt. Nothing even compared to it. So I lived my life a very different life. I didn't follow the normal childhood of other people. I knew my life was for God. And so I didn't even smoke, drink alcohol. I didn't have sex. I followed a path that I believed to be something to keep and retain my purity and my innocence and my connection to that. But on top of that, because of that connection in those moments, I didn't even have the desire for those things. I didn't need to suppress these feelings.
Right.
They just didn't exist within me. And so I led my life because I knew I was going to marry this incredible man, this enlightened being from the age of 8. And so I had a premonition at the age of 8 that I was going to meet this man. So I led my life because that was my goal. That was that lofty goal that I was attached to, that I was like, I'm going to meet this man. And that's the whole purpose of my life for now. And I knew this man would lead to my own enlightenment, my own awakening. So no, this has nothing to do with spirituality or enlightenment. It's character. That's what really is the emanation, the reflection of it.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I also want to ask you that there is a constant debate about past lives and future lives and the multiple lives that we live. Now, there is a school of thought that believes that we have a lot of lives. There is a school of thought which believes that we only have one life, and you pay all your debts in this life itself. The karma, whatever you do, whatever you sow, you reap that. And then there is also a school of thought that you are born into lower life states, and then every time you get a rebirth, you have to, sort of get into a better life form. And once you become a human being, you never go back to those lower life forms again, and you're always born as a human being. Which of these theories is true? What is actually the truth behind?
We've conducted no experiments on these particular theories, so I can't declare what's true. I would say it would make sense maybe if past lives were real, right? Because then it makes sense as to why people come into this world with different levels of consciousness, different levels of evolution within their being. That makes sense. Different tendencies, different, patterns in life that just seem inherent upon birth for a lot of them, and that we have to work so hard to change and get rid of, right? And it's so difficult for a lot of us to do that.
Right.
But I would really say that regardless of what's true or not, I feel like that's not important. I feel like the life that you have right now, no matter what the truth is about past lives or anything, what you have right now is the most important thing to you, right? Is this present moment, is this present life. So it's like, treat it as such, treat it as, this one moment, and that's it. Don't wait, don't delay, right? Don't excuse yourself either. It's like people use past lives to excuse things.
Right.
They use it to write off, and to take no responsibility, right? And I feel like that we must take responsibility. That's the first step of becoming spiritual, is to take proper responsibility. And then I would say, outcome, that's more important than anything, is whatever, practice or anything that we do in our lives, the most important measurement of true progress is outcome. People get lost in the practice itself or just finding new practices. It becomes an addiction for people where they're so addicted to just being a part of something or following a practice, or they feel special or purposeful just being involved in something without any actual outcome being delivered. So I'd say true progress is measurable, and it should be scientifically, able to be validated. So that's the true measurement of progress. So focus on the here and now, the life you have.
Let's hear about some testimonial, if you can share with us.
Sure. So one testimony I love to share is from my personal assistant. She lived her whole life with a very severe autoimmune condition called Crohn's disease.
Oh.
Right? And as you know, there's no cure. It's just
Right.
management. Hers was on the severe side. It was so severe. At the age of 19, she had her colon removed. Right? And when she had it removed, right, she was in the hospital with excruciating pain. She was on morphine, gabapentin. Nothing got rid of her pain. And so from that point onward, her life was miserable as well, because when you don't have a colon, you're missing the part of your digestive system that, holds your stool. Right? So essentially, everywhere she goes, she has to know where the closest bathroom is to her, right? You can imagine traveling in that state, the huge amount of anxiety. If you're not near a bathroom, right, she can have an accident. Anything could happen. She's using the bathroom 30 times a day. And on top of that, there's a large part of your digestive system that hosts a lot of your neurotransmitters. Right? Which produces, those feelings of happiness, well-being, peace, contentment, satisfaction. So she was missing a huge amount of neurotransmitters that exist within the gut the moment that organ was removed. So she's highly depressed, full of anxiety, restless thoughts all the time. She could never find peace. Her mental health got so bad, she was suicidal so many times. And all the drugs she's taking to help reduce her inflammation, right, her immune response, all those things don't work. Up until that point, nothing was able to, do that. She was already trying all these different complementary and alternative approaches. She had given up on modern medicine and started trying other things. She started questioning the nature of God and God's existence at that point. After the blessing, right? After the blessing, she uses the bathroom 3 to 4 times a day now.
Wow.
Right? And on top of that, 0 pain, 0 inflammation. She hasn't been to the hospital in years. She met us in 2019. It's 2026. She's never been hospitalized since then, right? She's on 0 medication, 0 pain medication. I forget, she also has a very severe arthritic condition where part of your spinal cord fuses, right? And it's degenerative. It has no resolution. It doesn't heal itself. So it only gets worse over time. Right? And they give you a huge amount of drugs and steroids and things to help manage that. And on top of that, she's, has this huge amount of vitality. Her hair's growing in full and luscious. She's eating everything. Wow. She's lifting heavy weights. Doctors told her that she could never lift and should never lift. She's lifting I think her limit was 40 pounds. She's lifting 70 pounds.
Wow.
Right? And she walks faster than all of us. I have to sometimes run to catch up with her. She's like 5'4" or 5'5", and I'm like 5'11", and I'm running to catch up with her, right? and she has, right, huge quality of life. She's eating everything, all kinds of things doctors said that she couldn't eat, probably for the rest of her life. She's eating, no problem, nothing whatsoever. And even better, she's happy. She said she never thought that she could be happy in her life. And because of this blessing, she's like, I'm happy again. And it wasn't just because, all of this led to a better life. It's like her neurotransmittership. We've seen that in our clinical trials, shifts in neurotransmitters. We've done trials on over 100 blood parameters where we measure neurotransmitters, clothoprotein, hormones, insulin, cholesterol, things that are not affected by placebo or psychology. We're changing, right, at the level of blood parameters, neurotransmitter, hormones, endocrine functioning, right? These types of things. Modern medicine, when we get to things like the clothoprotein, there is no drug treatment, conventional or alternative, that can impact or affect the clothoprotein, which is indicative of longevity in our life. It is an anti-aging protein. We've been able to increase it marginally. And with the effect of the blessing, we've seen increases by as much as 700%, nearly 700%.
Wow.
With the clotho-protein. We're affecting changes that are so revolutionary. We've had issues publishing these studies. Just recently, we've been able to publish 670 articles. Just recently, I don't know if you're familiar with the peer review process for scientific publication,
Yes.
right? So these are randomized control clinical trials. They're the gold standards, right? Where we have double-blinded procedures on a lot of them as well, where the investigators don't even know who's getting blessed. Even the participants don't know. We have a group that believes they're getting blessed as well. And then on top of that, even I don't know who I'm blessing, and it's conducted remotely from the United States to a group located in India. I don't know their problems. I don't know their names. I know nothing about them, right? So we have all of this. We're measuring, things like the NIH toolbox for cognition and motor function, gold standard, removing all subjective data from neuropsychological effects. Right. And then we're doing clinical assessment on psychology by third-party, licensed clinicians. And these are done by multinational billion-dollar, institutions that are legitimate and conduct this research all the time, even for the United States. So this is not just like one vague laboratory conducted in India, in the remote outskirts of some town somewhere. We're talking about legitimate third-party gold standard procedures with all the latest technologies and protocols. Right. And that's how we conduct our clinical trials with large groups of people as well for over 180 days.
This is huge.
This is huge. And so what we found as a result, right, from these clinical trials, and we're treating people with severe mental and emotional health problems. So everybody who has like issues with their, mental restlessness, ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, PTSD, sadness. We're dealing with chronic fatigue, menstrual wellness. It's a huge problem with women. A lot of women think that even their menstrual cycles are normal when they're abnormal. They're not. 75% of women have issues with their menstrual health, with their menstrual problems, severe menstrual problems, and they don't even know it. They think it's normal because that's what we're taught, right? And then we have people suffering from chronic fatigue, poor relationships, poor finances, all of these things that, have an effect caused by mental and emotional health problems. All of these things have an effect from that. And so we're measuring all of these different parameters. And we're measuring, in one of the studies, we did over 100 blood parameters. Another one, 3 of them, we've done on the NIH toolbox for cognition and motor function.
Okay.
Now, this is something developed by the National Institutes of Health, right, and is now in full operation for all clinical trials. It's the gold standard, removes all subjective data and makes sure all the measurable data remains as objective as possible, completely analytical and empirical. And basically what it is, it's been utilized since 2012, right? And it's basically hosted in a server in the United States of America, and it's completely randomized. The investigators, the participants, nobody knows what questions will be asked. And we're measuring things for cognition and motor function. For cognition, things like executive function, working memory, vocabulary, those kinds of things, as well as in motor function, locomotion, dexterity, endurance, grip strength, right? A lot of different parameters. And usually this type of study, this type of test is conducted to see if there's any adverse effect in a clinical trial, because we've never seen improvements, not to the degree that we have seen. So it's usually there to measure if a certain drug or therapy, before it's released to the masses, has any adverse effects on cognition and motor function. Ours is the first clinical trial, right? 3 clinical trials, in fact, that has shown that in every single tested parameter, near complete resolution or near 100% improvement in every single tested parameter of its kind.
Wow.
Which is unheard of.
Unheard of, yes.
Right? And this data, you can't change and manipulate. It's locked in the server in the United States. Once it's put in there, it's locked for good. You can't go back and change any of it. Right? And then we're following all the basic protocols. Even with all of this properly done, right, with this kind of objective data and these significant outcomes, and all of this, by the way, matches what the participants are reflecting with the psychological assessments, right? All of the psychological health issues that they came to us with in the clinical trial were completely resolved. All of them. Menstrual wellness, right? ADD, fatigue, tiredness, well-being, confidence, inspiration, enthusiasm, libido, health, relationship issues, harmonious relationships, finances tripled in many cases. We had relationships become harmonious and happy. People started appreciating, respecting them, and giving them the credit that they so long deserve in society. We have completely revolutionized these people's lives.
This is fascinating because it's like you don't even have to know what is the problem that the person is going through.
We have no idea, right? Only the psychological assessment, right, is measuring what kind of problems they have.
And like you're saying, the women don't even know that they have a menstrual problem.
Truly.
And it's getting fixed. And it's like, I mean, I can only imagine the pleasure and the joy on those people's faces.
It was a new life. It's new life. I like to say we give people life. The same clients that have been with us since 2009, 10, 11 are still with us today. Wow. Why? Because these blessings give them life. This is a new level of functioning, a new level of potential that they didn't have, they weren't able to operate at before. They tried everything. All of our clients have come from the wellness industry, have come from science and medicine when doctors say there's no solution.
Tried and tested everything.
And they're doctors. Some people have chronic disabilities that have no resolution and no answer. Fibromyalgia. There's a woman, a testimonial woman with fibromyalgia, right? Who has huge painful symptoms. And, she found after just a few blessings, fibromyalgia completely gone. Like all the symptoms have completely resolved. The medication, pharmaceutical drugs weren't working. She tried to change her life with just lifestyle and diet alone. That didn't get rid of the problem.
I think there are so many problems which the medical industry says are lifestyle and diet related. But even if you fix that, I mean, the more you fix your lifestyle and diet, the more number of problems erupt which are incurable.
Right. It's like there are so many things that we think we have an answer to or trying to. And really, if we have so many different paths and so many different, like, we'll try this and that and that and that, it's an indication that we're just trying to manage the symptoms. There's not a real solution out there. Otherwise, why do we need to try so many things to find an answer? And so that's what these people find is new life. So these clinical trials, right, that's what I was saying recently. I love to share this because I feel like it adds to our credibility of how unprecedented the data is.
No, absolutely.
Because what happened with this recent publication that we try to get published in a very high profile journal, and we've already been published in that journal, right, a few times. And in the same journal, we try to publish another one of our studies, and what they do in the peer review process is they'll take an article, right? Like our article, for example, and all these scientists, PhD level scientists, right? There's a whole board of them, and they all take the article, they read through it, they make an assessment, they, piece it apart, dissect it, and check if there's any problems, any, issues, check for clarity, language, make sure there's, nothing misconstrued in there. They basically do a full analysis and decide either they send it back for edits or they deny the publication, or they approve it and send it to the editorial board to publish the study. And this editor, right, of this journal sent it to 4 on his board, 4 PhD level scientists, which is the usual standard number, maybe 3 or 4 PhD scientists. All of them approved it. All of them said, this is incredible. Yes, send it for publishing. The world should see this, right? That editor sent it to another PhD level scientist. Again, that person approved it, said this is incredible. Sent it to 3 more, kept sending it to another one. And by the time we were done with all the peer review process, he had sent it to 9 PhD level scientists. Every single one of them couldn't find a problem with the study. They found that everything was correct. Everything was well, documented, well executed. The data was incredible. Everybody approved publication, but the editor rejected publication for one reason alone. They said, I can't believe that this is possible. I don't believe that these kind of results can be published, that these kind of results can happen through something like this or by any means at all. And so for that reason alone, I'm denying publication.
Oh.
So you can imagine the kind of journey that we've had over decades, right, of this kind of investment, of seeking corroboration with scientists with their own biases, right? My husband, my guru, he had the saffron robes, the long hair, right, all of that, and he cut it all off to just be taken seriously by the scientific community. And you have no idea, you do that, you lose credibility with the religious community. You're
Absolutely.
dressed in a suit and tie. I'm dressed like this,
Yeah.
right? I lose credibility by the religious institutions just by looks alone.
What I exactly asked you. I mean, does it really
Exactly.
go together? But yes, we need people like you to tell everybody that yes, it does go together,
Right.
and they're not two different things.
But the outcome doesn't lie. The data's there.
Absolutely.
And so we've successfully published 670 peer-reviewed publications. Most scientists only get 12 in their lifetime. We've done very well, and we've successfully, I say, proven without a doubt that consciousness is the fundamental force. Consciousness is responsible for our quality of life, and the only way to improve our lives, to give us health and well-being, peace, happiness, stability, good quality of life, is to evolve our consciousness, and the most effective way that we have seen that is through these divine blessings.
I have one last question for you.
Yes.
That as per what you can see in the future, and as how humanity is going today, we see a lot of crime around us. We see, I mean, nuclear weapons being made, World War III probably, just around the corner. We see zombie drugs, and we see pandemics around the world. Do you think somewhere we are headed towards extinction, like a global annihilation?
No, I don't think so. If you ever look at how energy moves, right, energy always moves forward and then falls backward. And then moves forward and then falls backward. That's physics. That's a natural movement of life. So life always moves forward and then falls backwards. So what we're seeing is a moment of falling backwards, but the darkness, every time we have darkness, right, it's proper contrast for evolution. It's proper perspective, right? You see a lot more people who are concerned now with politics and economics and life and the operations of culture and all these things than ever before, simply because of the darkness we're in. So the darkness, I feel like, is bringing awareness to the problems that have persisted long ago. These aren't new problems. These are old problems that have reached a boiling point within our humanity and our culture and our society. So these are problems that have been stemming and rooted in something long ago that have just developed for so long. And I truly believe that what we're doing with our organization is that we are providing something. This is something that's going to revolutionize everything. It's going to alter our society, our politics, our economics, our medicine, everything. It has the potential, the capacity to upend, right, everything that we see about life, about nature, about how the world works. When you make something a reality that's measurable, eventually what happens, it becomes part of the establishment. It becomes institutionalized. And I don't feel that's entirely a bad thing, because once something is institutionalized, if it's a good thing, while, maybe some of its effects are reduced, but ultimately, if that vital truth is still there, then we are building upon something that gives us more stability as a society. It's something that we have more context and reference to. It's something that'll help our progress and our future evolution. And we're restoring God's authenticity. We're restoring a fact-based God on this planet, which is where all of these problems persist, is from, like I said, lower levels of evolution, low states of consciousness, from losing that perspective of the very fact that God is real, a real phenomena, something that actually exists. Just proving it scientifically will put everybody's lives in perspective. It will put everything that we do in perspective, and we'll start to question, our own lives, how we're living our lives, what the true nature of the world, everything will I can see it filtering into every aspect of life as we know it, everything. And we've revolutionized technology, medicine. We've made bacteria, drug-resistant bacteria, finally respond to antibiotics, right? This energy is being able to kill cancer cells and give life and viability to healthy cells with one blessing, right? This is such a profoundly intelligent energy that it can take care of all these problems easily. All these problems would cease to exist the moment consciousness is evolved. So I don't feel like this is an end of humanity. I feel like it's a turning point.
Wow. I'm really, really happy to hear that. Thank you
Yes,
so much. And I
course.
wish you all the best with the
Thank
work
you.
that you're doing. We
Thank
need
you.
more people like you in the world. And
Appreciate
just want to leave my audience with the thought that think about what she said. And if you have any doubts about what we spoke about today, I know it's a kind of conversation which I would say it's just like the tip of the iceberg what we spoke about today, and there's so much more that we need to talk about so that we can have a
Right.
better understanding of this. I'm going to put her contact details in the description. Please reach out to her and let us know in the comments what you felt today after listening to this. And don't forget to like this, share this video with as many people as you can, and subscribe to the channel. You're watching Candid Confessions with Chhavi. This is both of us signing out. Love and peace from us to you.